Welcome back to Social Impact Live, and specifically this episode of Inspiration to Master Your Destiny By. I've often said that there are multiple ways to create change in the world, and I think about that concept overall as something that is one of the reasons that we were put here as people, to be stewards of a kingdom, God's kingdom on earth, a place where there is opportunity for all, where people have an opportunity to become who they want to become, and give their gifts to the world in a really valuable and meaningful way. There is a quote that I came across recently that I've been thinking about a good amount, and it is that the man who wants to lead the orchestra must turn his back on the crowd. So this is a quote by James Crook, who was I believe, former governor of Upper Canada back in the day. But I think, regardless of sort of where it comes from, the quote itself resonates with me as something that is ultimately true about the lives that we need to live if we want to give our gifts to the world in a way that does them and pays them the respect that they're sort of due. So, the man who wants to lead the orchestra must turn his back on the crowd. What does that really mean? As I've been thinking about my own life, as I've been thinking about the work I want to do, this channel itself, the impact that I want to have in the world, the people that I want to be speaking to, the issues I want to be speaking on behalf of, there's this constant other thing that creeps into my mind, this other background thought, right? Which is, what do other people think about what it is that I'm trying to do, about what I'm trying to say, about my approach to doing this? What are their thoughts and their opinions on what my thoughts and my opinions are? And this quote, I think, is really valuable because it reminds me of two things. The first is that to lead, right, in some way, shape, or form, I think is what happens when you give your gifts to the world. The area that you are truly gifted in, the thing that you are really meant to share with the world, is something that you can be profoundly gifted in. You can be so good at it that you are a leader in that space, in that way, in society. Your gift might be really understanding the needs of other people. And for you to truly give that gift, to really give into that, would make you a leader, right? Someone who can be a leader, a master at least, right? Of giving that gift to the world, of understanding other people, of listening to their needs, and then possibly turning that into doing something for their benefit or for the world's benefit. If your gift is to play basketball in a way that inspires people, to move their bodies differently, or to marvel at the human form and our abilities, then you mastering that, right, positions you to potentially be a leader within that. So when it comes to leading the orchestra, right, the orchestra in and of itself is a band of different people, each of whom has a gift in some way, shape, or form, but who is using that gift to generate a certain outcome, to produce a certain result, and it is a common result between them. So the two things that this quote makes me think of, one is that voice that I always have in the back of my head, wondering what other people think, needs to be silenced more and more and more. Because if the conductor is too obsessed with what the crowd thinks, then he or she can't focus on the others who are giving their gifts in that moment to move toward a common goal. It's not to say that the crowd doesn't matter. It's not to say that the crowd shouldn't be taken into consideration from time to time. But the conductor's job is ultimately to lead the orchestra. And that means focusing on the orchestra itself. So the crowd and the people and their thoughts and their opinions and their beliefs in what's possible and what's not possible is less important, because the conductor's job is to play the notes that people didn't expect to come, to ensure that the rest of the orchestra can hit those notes, can play that tune, can evoke those emotions in a way that's really powerful. So that's the first thing that comes to mind for me. And the second thing that comes to mind for me is a quote that I've always had, a poem that I wrote years ago. Years ago I wrote a poem, and it was about wanting to be the instrument in God's orchestra, wanting to be an instrument that he plays for the world, that he plays so that I'm not playing my own song, but I'm playing his song in a way. To be used as an instrument by the greatest musician possible, right, is a gift, I think. And this quote makes me think about that as well, that I want to be not just the person who's leading the orchestra, at least the one that I am meant to lead with my own gifts in some way, shape, or form, but I also want to be an instrument myself, to play the tune that I am meant to play. And in either of those situations, whether I'm the person who is playing my tune, or I am the person who is leading the orchestra itself, I need to focus on what it is that I am supposed to be doing to the best of my abilities, rather than being overly obsessed with the crowd at any given moment. If the musician who is in the orchestra is overly focused on the crowd, then he or she will forget their notes. If the conductor is overly focused on the crowd, then he or she cannot conduct the orchestra itself to reach their full potential and play what they could play. So I guess the question for you is, who's the crowd that you need to silence? Who's the crowd that you need to turn your back on in order to really focus in on the orchestra that you plan to lead? And maybe that's the other question. What's the orchestra that you're leading? What is the song that you were meant to ensure the world could hear, that God put into you from the moment that you were born? What is that thing? And the question is, are you pursuing it the way that you believe you could be? That's what I've got for you on today's episode of Social Impact Live. I'll be back tomorrow, another episode. Tomorrow is Gratitude Sunday. I would love to hear your answers to these questions and how this quote resonates with you. The man who wants to lead the orchestra must turn his back on the crowd. I know that for me, that's something that I am going to do from